what's in the other section I was waiting for.
It says live on Facebook there now.
Setting up meeting for Facebook Live. Normally it works perfectly, to be honest.
That says live now. It says live on Facebook. Meetings now.
Yay! Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to make sure. Live on Facebook. So I want to go to the page. Hi, everyone. If you're tuned in to the Naked Truths episode. So it's brought to you by Naked Dog food as it should be. And these are canine conversations as they should be. So we want to delve into some of the truths surrounding dog food, dog care, dog behaviour. And tonight we're going to be talking to Dr. Conor Brady. I just need to go back to my Zoom. If you have any questions throughout this broadcast, then please do write them at the bottom. And if we see them if they pop up, then we will get to those questions. If not, I absolutely promise that we will answer those. If you've got any questions about where to find a stockist for the Naked Dog food, then do write that as well at the bottom. And also what we love to see is people recommending stores that they would like to see Naked Dog stocked in, because we have almost hit 100 stores actually now, which is not bad going for a year's work. So yeah, quite pleased about this. And while we're here as well, I just want to highlight next week's show as well and say thank you to Debbie from next week, because Debbie was our stand-in reserve for this week should Conor have not been able to be here. He has a very good reason, which I'm sure he'll tell us in a minute. But so just a shout out to Debbie from the Stolen and Missing Pets Association. Thank you for sitting in to be our emergency live, but you will be next week for definite. Actually, Conor, I don't know whether you knew this, but there's actually apparently more laws surrounding someone stealing your bike than stealing your dog.
I'm not surprised about that. I'm not surprised about that at all. No, we have a terrible problem with that in Ireland. We've got dog nappers all over the place, and in and out of court if they're caught. There's just no punishment. They're property as opposed to any emotional attachment. So there's no payouts. There's nothing. I mean, and for the chances of your dog turning up is tiny. It's odious. Oh my God.
Well, Debbie is planning to change that, and there's things we can do to support her. So you'll have to log in next week. Tell your friends that if hopefully they haven't had that happen, but let's see if we can really support Debbie.
Yeah, definitely.
So tonight we are going to be talking about something. Oh my God, this is the ultimate debate, really, isn't it? In raw feeding is the science behind raw.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you coming on, because also as a vet, then the knowledge that you've got, the kudos that you've got talking about this kind
of a vet, doctor of nutrition.
Oh,
yeah, that's all right.
I'm happy doing this.
I get an
awful. Tell us all.
I have a doctorate in nutrition and behavior, and I was in guide dogs for 4 or 5 years. So when I do consultations, it's just nutritional consultations with people, and you do a bit of natural health stuff, but it's nothing. You keep clear of the vet kind of field. But you use doctor because you have a doctorate, but no, definitely not a vet. No, I was actually never interested in being a vet. I was always interested in mucking out and doing the training and stuff, as I've been doing since I was a kid. I've got videos as a kid doing it, but I was lucky to get into guide dogs really when I came out of college, and I went in there as a pup supervisor. So you're looking after pups, for the first year of their life, but you get to see them every week. So you've got like the slightest change in anything, and these dogs are on strict diets, and so any sort of change, you see them week to week to week to week. So when you're into science, it's kind of like, oh, this is such a great controlled population. So that was the start of it really, and bumping into guide dog schools had changed to raw, and then it was just, it's like, this is amazing. So that was the start of it, all right. But dealing with vets, I live in a veterinary world, and I'm absolutely, but a non-vet, absolutely, I'm still outside that fold. Yeah.
However, the research you've done for the book that you have just launched is quite phenomenal, quite considerable. It's like, didn't you say how many? Is it something like 100 and? Go on, tell me how many references.
There's 1,200 references in it. But it's been cut. I mean, that's 4 sections in that book, and it's essentially like 4 little books in one, so it is colossal. So yeah, I could never do it again. I'm never doing it again. It was twice as hard as the doctorate, I would say, and it's kind of lonely. There's not a whole lot of people doing that sort of stuff. It's hard to dig up the information. But anyway, it's grand. My wife would have left me if it took another month, I'd say. So it was good to get it out when I did. Got it out just before Christmas, so I was lucky with that.
Yeah, I'm sure it was in the stockings for many raw feeders.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what I want to just go to first is the fact that when we talk about science behind raw or science behind pet food at all, the average pet owner, generally speaking, people that own dogs believe that there's science behind the food they're already feeding or behind the processed food. We are led down this route to understand that there is science behind processed food. So, you know, what is actually the science behind processed food? How can it be that somebody like Jamie Oliver can do a school dinners campaign and not get asked for science behind children eating food, and yet we are? So where is the science behind feeding a processed diet?
Yeah, it's a good. I like the Jamie Oliver analogy. That's good. I'm gonna steal that and use it as my own. So we'll have to cut that out. The thing is, like, when you look at books like those two there, the blue one there, Small Animal Clinical Nutrition, it's like the veterinary Bible for veterinary nutrition given to students practically for free in college. Well, that's written by Colgate-Palmolive, who own Hill's Pet Food. And so straight from the off, you're kind of thinking, okay, well, that's what this is essentially a dry food book. In my opinion, this doesn't make the information invalid. And you go, okay, I understand where it's coming from though. And when you read it, you quickly realize that they do have an enormous amount of studies in that book, but not studies that I would need of value. So let's say I wanted to see, okay, dry food's amazing. Yeah, it's the best product ever. It's so good. You definitely shouldn't feed any table scraps, fresh food. Fresh food is dangerous, all this sort of stuff. It's that good a product. And I go, wow, show me some good studies there with dry food being the best product ever. And there is not a single study of dry food outcompeting a well-made raw dog food. So that immediately is very telling. That was one of the major findings of the book. It's like, as I kept on reading, going, where is the study? You talk to vets and you go, what studies did you read that convince you? I mean, if I'm going to jump to a completely strange ultra-processed food, I'd want some pretty good evidence to suggest this is a good place to be. So that was interesting. So when people ask the raw dog food side, they stand on very shaky ground and they say, right, where's your science to show that, you know, your way is better? And so it's like they don't use science to get to where they are, but once they are there, this has been done by every product that's ever made it on the market, whether it's oil or lead and petrol or cigarettes or baby formula or like artificial sweetener, you know, weird chemicals that kill plants. So when they bring this, once they get that product onto market, and they will if they want it, believe me, it's just a matter of money. When they get that product on the market, they produce a lot of pseudoscience around it, and it's up to us, the consumer, to prove what they're doing is wrong. And until you do, they're right. So it's kind of like they use a funny, non-scientific way to get there, and then we must prove with science that they're wrong. But there hasn't been people investing in raw dog food. No one's thought to be doing studies. The University of Helsinki now is in Finland. They're churning out the goods, and they're doing head-to-head studies. That's what we want to do. So anytime someone talks to me about science and said, where's your evidence? I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll do study for study. I'll show the study that convinces me raw is better than dry. And then you show me the study you read that convince you dry is better than raw, to be so in my face about it. And I always I'll start off just to get the ball rolling, and I'll produce one of the stronger studies where raw fed dogs had less homocysteine in their blood than dry fed dogs, which is like a stress metabolite. And when they change the dogs from raw to dry, the amount of stress in the blood jumps by 5. And when they change from dry to raw, the stress drops by 5. Really significant finding. So it's like, this is just one of the reasons that raw-fed dogs suffer less atopy. They started looking into this down the road and finding that gene expression changes on the skin in dry-fed dogs. So on all cases, this is a real strong finding for raw food. And then I go, now you go. And they'll go, raw is dangerous. And it's like, no. We're doing this head-to-head thing that we said. So let's just stick to, and you keep hitting them with that. So you can't ask me for science if you're not prepared to use it yourself, you know. So that's my way out of that, because there's not a whole lot of studies of raw compared to dry, but there is a savage amount of circumstantial evidence, and that's really the whole point of the colossal book. It's just building up the argument to show you that the science is a bit of a dirty word in this industry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I remember from the raw proof document that Honey printed that the zinc levels in the guidelines. Now, I don't know whether this is NRC or AFCO. I know it's definitely FDAF, but I don't know if it's the other two as well. But this is based on a study of 18 Labrador puppies in 1991. 18 Labrador puppies. Yeah. 2 zinc levels, and it's which one. It wasn't which one was higher. It was, did increasing the zinc from 50 to 200 make a difference? They decided that it didn't. And so the zinc levels are what they are in the FDAF guidelines. And this is thus then used as what we define as the science behind the zinc that should be included in your dog's daily diet. So, I mean, okay, that is a study. You can't deny it. It was a study. It was done. But do we then class that as definitive in terms of what a dog needs for zinc?
Exactly. I've got my whole section 2 is dedicated to exactly that point. Jonathan self highlighted that one with the zinc. But when you look into, like, say, iron levels, the iron need in dogs, the study for a recommended daily allowance of iron in dogs is based on swine data. And they changed the swine data 10 years ago because they said, whoa, we're totally wrong here. And so for swine, for pigs, so 3 of the minerals, of the 11 minerals recommended for dogs, are based on what pigs need, not dogs. No studies were done on dogs. They've done so little studies on minerals that a lot of the minerals are the same for pups and adults, which we know can't be the same because we're growing at different rates and different amounts. They've got no maximums for a number of those minerals, such as salt. Go figure, no maximum for sodium, when we know how dangerous too much sodium is in humans. But I think the real interesting ones were like carbohydrate and like the carbohydrate need in dogs. Why do they use 50% carbohydrates in dogs? That was one of the things I bought all those books for. So you go through all their science and you find a little tiny paragraph for the carbohydrate need in dogs. And you go, wow, for a book with 1,500 pages, you only give it a paragraph? It's half your product. And in the paragraph you read, there's 4 studies used, and 2 of the studies are just repeats. It's just under a different thing. 3, and all studies are of pregnant females. They're all about 50 years old. And it's like, this is your evidence for using 50% carbohydrates. I mean, is there nothing else? And so you kind of, once you read that, you kind of realize, whoa, this is kind of like you pull back the curtain and you see little Oz peddling the machine and you go, lads, this is very shaky stuff. There's actually not enough zinc in prey animals to meet the minimum AFCO guidelines. So if you were to get a rat or a rabbit or wild birds, whatever, and you squidge them all up and you put them in a tube, that product would be zinc deficient to a dog. So I was looking at it, I think the minimum is 120 milligrams per kilo. And the maximum amount of zinc I can find is whatever animal at about 40, 50 milligrams per kilo. So how come the dog's prey animals is deficient in zinc? Because the AFCO guidelines are based on synthetic nutrients in cereal-based ultra-processed pet food, like an alien product. And this product contains zinc oxide, zinc sulfate, stuff that the dog cannot absorb. Yes, so they use huge amounts of it. So suddenly we, as people trying to balance these wonderful products like Naked Dog and any of the other raw dog foods out there, suddenly we're looking at it going, bloody hell, where am I going to get more zinc? I thought this was a perfect product. And now I have to go put in loads of ground up hemp seeds to satisfy you to make sure there's enough zinc, when it turns out natural zinc is absorbed about 10 times better than zinc oxide. So we've the same studies with calcium supplements. Calcium carbonate supplements are really poorly absorbed. So people that get their calcium from their diet only need a tiny amount. You can eat loads of calcium supplements, but your body just does not like it. It's not the same process the same way. So the zinc thing is really interesting, and Self was one of the first people to point that out. Yeah, but it's the same with all the minerals. It's so disappointing when you look behind the scenes. That's so AFCO, big problems with that AFCO feed guideline. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that struck me because the bioavailability, this is
yeah.
we're essentially talking about, of putting in zinc synthetically as oxide.
Yeah.
They're going to have to compensate and put a little bit more. And I think also the phytic acid comes into it as well, because in the mineral wheel that would block. So they do have to make it higher. It would be fantastic if we could have separate guidelines.
Wouldn't it?
In fact, having separate guidelines, in my view, doesn't compromise the FDAF guidelines. What it does mean is that companies that are producing the synthetic supplements to go in a processed food, they could potentially have 2 products, one that people use to put in a raw.
Not a bad idea.
So actually, it doesn't compromise anyone. It creates an additional.
Good idea.
It's something that myself and another canine industry nutritionists are chatting about on the sidelines.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Get that going. And I think it depends on what vitamins and minerals you use. I mean, we know chelated minerals. So like vitamins are from the land of the living. So the gut membrane loves them. It's like, yeah, come on in, guys, party. Come on in, doors open. Minerals are the people that don't know the owner of the house and they want to go to the party. So they go with somebody, and that somebody is a protein. It's a carbon molecule. So the mineral goes up holding his mate's arm and going, can I come in? And if the bouncer at the door sees the mate, goes, yeah, buddy, come on in, and the mineral gets in. So when they use zinc oxide, zinc sulfate, that's just minerals coming up the door going, let us in, lads. And the bouncers are going, no way, you're not coming in, lads. So chelated minerals are the fancy stuff, but they're mega pricey. So anyway, look, it's a long conversation, but I'm so happy that loads of raw dog food companies are onto this now. And so it's when they band together that it'll be like, this profile does not work for us, and we are just making our own profile. And what are you going to do? As long as you can defend that scientifically, I think that the PFMA and the likes would be fair enough. I think they would go along with it. We've got a raw man at the top of PFMA now, don't you?
Exactly, which is exactly why we're thinking of doing it now.
Now's the time to do it.
So it's interesting what you're saying about the amount of carbohydrate, because there is what I would say science to a degree behind not having the carbohydrate. So I don't know if you've read The Paradox of Pet Nutrition, Nottingham University. It's Dr. Patton with a T, double T, an orange book. It's really cool. It's not just about dogs, about all animals, but overfeeding them. And one of the things that he's saying is that the body, and especially the dog's body, has one way of reducing blood sugar if it gets too high, insulin. Right. And it has 8 ways of raising the blood sugar. So it's, in a sense, it's set up for having lack rather than
that's interesting.
Too much.
Cool.
And this is a whole definitive scientific book.
Ooh.
University.
I love it.
Really interesting. But it strikes me, and it's a question that I think most people go to, is that why is it that in terms of biology, vets are taught biology. Now, they have to obviously be taught this in order to cut open an animal, know where bits are, know how to perform surgery. So surely they are also taught about the function. So given what I've just said, why is it that they are not taught about the pancreas producing this one way of dropping blood sugar and not taught about the 8 other ways that raise it? I mean, things like that would strike me as, surely as a vet, they're taught about biology.
Yeah.
So where are they missing the beat in terms of what's actually on a process level happening with nutrition?
Yeah, it's tough. Like that's a question everybody asks about every single facet of nutrition in veterinary college. Like biology would be one of them. I mean, you're looking at the body of, if not a total carnivore, very close to it. I believe in a bit of veg for dogs. I know Naked Dog does a bit as well. So like, I believe in a bit of veg for a lot of different reasons. Don't need to get into it now, unless you want to. But to all extents and purpose, this is a meat eater through and through. So surely, like, the most basic understanding of biology will be looking at this animal from tooth to tail and go, wow, very short, fast intestines, no cecum, the way that their physiology, no need for carbohydrates, just, all this stuff. And it's like, this is screaming meat eater. And so why is it that their use of biology, which is amazing, that these kids come out, like, not just good at dogs, but cows, cats, sheep, insects, how can they, and anesthetize them, doing the surgery, running your business. It's like they've got a brush hanging off their back and they're doing this and snipping that and, going home and cooking the dinner. It's a terrible amount of work for someone to have to do. I mean, a doctor can't study a human and they come out as a general practitioner. They have a general idea of what you need, let alone try to do the studies. So I'd say, while in college, vets would have a very, very basic understanding. They're given small facets of a dizzying amount of subjects. And nutrition, believe me, is down the very bottom of the pile. One of the chapters in my book deals with the amount of education the vets are getting on nutrition, and the studies are screaming. The deans of the various universities in around Europe and often in the Middle East are saying that we're not teaching veterinary nutrition at all. And when it is taught, it's taught by somebody that has no nutritional training, because there's so few veterinary nutritionists around. And there is no vet nutritionists to promote raw. So we have a bit of an issue with all that. So their knowledge of that. So I'm not surprised when they do their biology class, they're not looking at the biology of a carnivore. They're looking at the biology from a pharmacological point of view, and that this drug might affect that. they're not coming out with an understanding. I mean, how many times have you talked to a vet, Caroline, where like the basic understanding of nutrition is just, they don't know how to read an ingredient label. I mean, bloody hell, you're selling these products and you don't understand, you know, you can't compare canned food to dry food. They don't know how much carb, they don't know how to work out sodium. It's like, yeah. So there's mega problems. I can't tell you because I haven't done the curriculum. I don't want to be unfair to them, but you would, speaking to any vets that are on the pro raw side in the Raw Feed and Veterinary Society, you will be saying that anything to do with nutrition is just not up there. Biology, digestive physiology, it's just not up there. If you've got to go by that book, it's just, you know, pretty scary. But those things aren't read. It doesn't matter. These studies are everything in that book. I didn't produce any of those studies. That's just a research book. So those studies are out there, but they're just not reading them. And we studies to show doctors aren't reading studies, vets are not reading studies. Nobody's reading anything about the evidence of the drugs they're recommending, because if they did, they probably wouldn't be recommending half them. You know, we've got crazy opioid epidemic, crazy antidepressant epidemic. You know, this is just a big problem. And now it's in the pet sector with the brakes off, you know, so big problems. Yeah.
Yes, we can end up branching into so many things when we start talking about evidence-based medicine. They work. No evidence, there's worms in there.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. You're going to just tell people where they can find your book. And because we haven't finished yet, but I want to just check on my phone and see if we've got any questions.
Okay.
While I'm looking down, this is why, because I can't look at two screens.
Okay. Will I give my book a little plug while you're doing that?
Why not?
So there, look, there's my book. Look at that beautiful collie on the front, having a little nibble. So that's Feeding Dogs. And you can find it on Amazon and Book Depository. I'm very surprised to find out that Book Depository is owned by Amazon. I'm deeply disappointed. So anyway, at Amazon, Book Depository, and I'm stocking bookstores now, pet shops, that kind of thing. So if there's somewhere close to you that think they might want to stock the book, absolutely, that's what we do. So we just have someone, you place an order with us and we can send it out. And so far better you buy it from your local guy than from your local person than anywhere else, keep it in the country. So that's what we do. That's where you'll find the book. Yeah.
We're brilliant, thank you. We're okay. There's no specific questions to answer. However, Karen is saying, "Oh no, there's no second book."
No.
So actually, because you well, partly because I wanted to anyway, I was kind of thinking of doing it, and because you then brought this book out, it really prompted me to finish a project that I was doing for Naked Dog, which was to start a blog. So we've got a blog now called Bloggers Not Blaggers.
Yeah.
For those of you that want to, and it is, at the moment, I have 6 studies. I have 6 studies that I have found online, some in Germany. I think there's one in Italy, one from Norway. I've got the 2 Helsinki, or it's not published yet, apparently. They need funding to publish it, but I've put the details from their website on there. I can't remember where the other study was for. Oh, and I've got the raw proof that Jonathan himself and Katie did. So on our blog at the moment, there are 6 studies which show that raw is, in comparison to processed, if not better. What I find fascinating is that these studies, they will show, for instance, the microbiome of a dog is different, and in their conclusion they'll say the microbiome of a processed dog and the microbiome of a raw fed dog are completely different, and this is all they get to. So of course I look at this and I say, okay, so the set of microbiome that we found with a raw fed dog, is that better? And I then was researching, is that better? Which of course it is, but they haven't put that at the bottom of the study.
They'll get annihilated for saying that in the study.
No, but it's so interesting because vets will say there's no definitive science, but there is. It just hasn't been written in the study.
Yeah, there is. There's some of the studies are stronger than others. The microbiome thing is enormously complicated. It's a field. In fact, if I was ever going to go into another thing, it'd be biome. That'd be the next thing. There's some great vets doing and work great. And when you talk to them, you realize you just know absolutely nothing. But it's a rabbit hole and it's in the distance. And it's like, I'm trying to avoid it, but it's just so tempting. But the biome thing is, but the problem is with biome is we don't know. No one's ever done a study so yes, the biome is different, but the biome is going to shift no matter what you feed it. It's what are the health implications of that long term? And so that is a very tricky subject, because anybody in the biome world will talk rings around the other person saying, well, you can't say that because of all this. And so biome people find it very hard to say, therefore the dog is healthier with this. I mean, obviously if you're blowing out in something like, you know, E. coli and salmonella and that kind of stuff, it's not going to be great. But what harm is it been less salmonella in dogs if one dog is higher salmonella than the other? What is the harm in that? We've no idea. Vultures have absolutely horrendous biomes. I mean, highly dangerous. If you went near a vulture's stomach, you'd get sick. So, you know, what it's a scavenging carnivore gut. So, you know, we just don't know long term. Yeah, and it questions probiotics. It questions everything. So that's a field when I talk to somebody in the know there, it's like I'm terrified. But I know the study you're talking about, Bialga, and that was good with the biome thing. And she also found that really important finding that was just casually mentioned was that blood triglycerides drop with raw. So blood fat drops when you feed raw. And vets should be pricking up their ears at that, because at the moment they feed these high carbohydrate diets to dogs and cats. Dogs and cats are suffering with pancreatitis to a disgusting degree. And the vet then feeds these high carbohydrate diets, sees fat in the blood and blames the fat. But what we know from studies is that the more carbohydrates you feed, the more fat builds in the blood, because the body looks at the carbohydrates and goes, lovely, carbohydrates, fast energy, and it burns that, and it stops burning fat. So as you keep on feeding carbohydrates, fat builds in the blood. And so what does your vet do when the pancreas starts complaining? He looks at the blood and goes, oh, the blood fat is too high. What's the solution? Drop the fat content and keep the carbohydrates high. So their understanding of pancreatitis, it's one of the most important subjects for highlighting how little they understand nutrition, because if they did, they would never recommend carbohydrate diets for dogs with pancreatitis. So anyway, that blood triglycerides finding is really important for the raw sector. More people need to do on that. A little bit boring for some people, but that's the sort of stuff that keeps me tail wagging in the bed. And I just have to get up and go, bloody hell, I'll do one more hour and then I'll go back to bed. Anyway.
Behind it. In fact, there is a starch-based study, isn't there? And that isn't there. That's the one that they cite all the time, or people cite when they're talking about starch. It's okay to feed starch because they have this genetic adaptation.
Oh, let me talk about this, please. Give me 2 minutes to talk about this.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Well, I'm like, I look at it and I think, but first of all, that's ancient grain. That's not refined grain. That's ancient grain, like probably spelt or barley or something we're not using these days.
Yeah, wheat today is totally alien. I mean, it's 40, like the gluten in wheat is just this alien crop that can't live without us, you know. So, yeah, wheat's a strange one. That study was Axelson in 2013. People should check it out. Really interesting. And they used genes and they looked in the dog and they found that some breeds have more of this particular gene, AME2B. In other words, the dog can produce more amylase from his pancreas. And amylase is used to digest carbohydrates. So, in other words, the dog never would have evolved these if he wasn't fed carbohydrates at some point. Some breeds have lots of it. Other breeds don't have this adaptation, which is huskies and any other dogs that evolve beside hunter-gatherers. Only the dogs that evolve beside farmers grow this. So we know dogs have some tiny evolutionary steps towards plant carb. This dog has thousands and thousands of genes doing carnivorous things, and here is a couple that are doing some carbohydrate things. So it's an interesting step towards adaptation that Darwin would have given his left eye to understand. And there's a couple of other adaptations that dogs have that cats don't have. They've got hepatic glucanase, things that, you know, true carnivores, owls, trout, cats don't have. So they are better at digesting glucose than cats, but only to a very small degree. They can eat this. They have been fed this material in the past, as you said, some form of grain, whatever. So what the dry food companies have done is have taken this tiny little adaptation and said, see, that's why we've been force feeding dogs 60% carbohydrates since 1940, because of this study in 2014. That's really smart. Well done. So they foresaw the future and saw this study coming. But that aside, the best rebuke to that was Doug Newman when he was talking to Gene Dodds. And Doug Newman said, so I can digest sucrose and ethanol. So should cookies and rum be 50% of my diet? No, of course not. We know we can digest these things. It's not the point. You know, is it appropriate for me to eat 50% cookies? No, it's not. And this, as you said, is refined carbohydrates, high GI food, rapid punch of blood to the sugar. You wouldn't recommend that for any human. We're told to eat maybe 20, 30% carbohydrates from whole grain sources, unprocessed. Dogs are eating 60% of the lowest quality flour you can imagine in the cooked, ultra-processed, rapidly digested product. You wouldn't advise that for any human. And here is this meat eater who doesn't need carbohydrates. Oh, it makes me so mad. Anyway.
Okay. I'll tell you what else I found interesting about that study is that there were certain breeds that didn't have the adaptation or didn't show this genetic adaptation to the animal. Right. And two of them, if I remember, well, I know one of them was definitely Westies, because that's what made me think of it. But the Chinese crested, I think, the dog, the
Oh
Chinese
yeah.
crested didn't have this. Now, the Westies, how interesting, they haven't got that starch adaptation, and they have, the prevalence of
Yeah.
yeast
Yeah.
conditions in Westies is very high.
These are divils. They're very difficult to get right as well when they go wrong. Yeah, it's
Yet they're
interesting.
not necessarily saying, okay, dogs can have starch, but actually Westies better
Yeah.
not,
I think Akitas in Japan didn't have it because they evolved beside hunter gatherers, and Huskies up the north don't have it because they hunter gatherers don't eat carbohydrates to any great degree. So the dogs that evolve beside the farmers that grow crops, they have it to quite a high degree, 20 to 28, 32 copies. But a husky might have 3 or 4 copies, the same as a dingo, which is a domestic dog 4 or 5,000 years ago. So yeah, it's just but this is the sort of science they use. They take something that's really interesting and they go and they twist it, and then they use it to support what is a ridiculous stance that they predicted this 60 years ago. The only reason they're feeding high carbohydrates is because it's cheap. Wheat was the main ingredient, and now it's corn because the corn belt is open in the US and it's cheaper than wheat. And now your dogs are eating corn. That's as simple as that. There's nobody looking in at this sector. I can say this, great being outside the veterinary kind of clique, because I can say anything I want as long as I'm fair and I don't mention brands. But like wheat and corn, to suggest that's not a good idea in humans and a good idea in dogs, like, doesn't hold any water. And yet that's why they don't debate these things in public, sadly.
Yeah. Okay, well, we will round up, I think, because you are the busiest man on Facebook, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, and I have a
Every
baby.
day doing a live.
I have a baby on the way tomorrow. Well, I say tomorrow. Tomorrow's the due date, but in the next few days. And so yeah, and then as you bring the book out, you're supposed to be doing lives and doing stuff. But actually, what I have to do is just wind down. I have to kind of switch onto more important things now. So I'll be gone for 3 weeks, and then I'll come back and hopefully do a few more. But it was great talking to you, Karen. I really appreciate you having me on as well, because the exposure is really good. So I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I've found a golden nugget of information that I thought you were a vet. So I massively anyone that I've been ranting, I'm talking to a really cool vet tonight.
Yeah.
I just want to say as well, for anyone who's watching this and you're kind of like a bit whoa about everything we've been talking about, it is very easy to switch to raw these days. So companies like Naked Dog, we make these ready-made complete and balanced. So literally you just have to pick this from the freezer and you just defrost it and feed it to the dog. It's that easy to get started on raw. And the big thing really with raw is that raw is real food. Raw is better because it's real food. So if it all goes terribly wrong to begin with, our advice is don't switch back to the processed, go to real food that's lightly cooked, and contact somebody like from Naked Dog, like you might get to talk to myself, or some of the other companies. They obviously all have people that support them. But the key is it's so easy to switch over. Yeah. It's so easy to switch over now, and we're here to support you and to support your dogs as well if things don't go exactly as you planned. Okay. So next week we will be back on Tuesday. And as I said at the beginning of this show, we will be talking to Debbie about how we can protect our pets from being stolen. Because we need, if we're going to feed raw, whatever we're going to feed, we need them in our kitchen. So this is pivotal. Apparently dog theft has gone up considerably. I think it was something like, I was reading in the PFMA newsletter today, 320 in a certain area between June and August in 2020, whereas it was only 150 in this area in the whole of 2019. So this is increasing. I mean, you've said yourself at the beginning. So really important to come back next week. It's not all about knowing the science behind raw. It's about how to protect our pets as well.
Yeah,
Thank you for watching the Naked Truth show, Canine Conversations as they should be. And we will see you next week.